Hey, everybody. Thanks for stopping by and tuning in to this Black Eyed Susan edition. Forget that. Battle of Normandy edition of WPT in 20. Jason, of course, catching up with all of you on a sunny and really nice Thursday morning here in Fort Lauderdale. Won't be attending the Preakness this year in person. It got me thinking again, just with it being Preakness week and with the second jewel, the Triple Crown on Saturday. I just was thinking back right before I hit record. Only two editions of the Preakness I've been to in person were way back when in 97 and 98, my freshman and sophomore year in college. At the time was going to school in Virginia, small school called Randolph-Macon, just north of Richmond. Played lacrosse. A lot of you know that. I played in high school and college and still very much love lacrosse. Naturally, being a school in Northern Virginia, I had a lot of teammates that were from Maryland and from Baltimore, including, coincidentally, one of my really good buddies, also named Jason, back in school. And, he was from Baltimore. So, yeah, both those Preaknesses, we went up north, stayed with his mom and dad, and caught two really great runnings of the Preakness. I don't know now, being in my mid 40s, if I could last over maybe 15 minutes in the Preakness infield, even if life in general is a lot tamer than it was 25 plus years ago. But again, that Silver Charm, I got Silver Charm and Real Quiet. Those were the two, runnings of the Preakness. So it's really two great runnings. And I still, off the top of my head, that battle between Silver Charm and Freehouse with Captain Bodgett and Touch Gold, who stumbled so bad and was closing, and it was like the four of them in that blanket finish. That probably is my favorite Preakness of all time. Huge Silver Charm and a huge Freehouse fan as well. So yeah, some great memories there. The week started though for West Point. I just want to take a second and I'll throw up to the replay here to Runaway Rojo, who started for West Point for the stable, started Preakness week with a good effort. I mean, certainly got the stable despite not winning off on a right foot. I thought he ran really well, beaten by a 4-year-old who had run 9 prior times and had a couple of pretty fast races on his resume. Good effort by Rojo, and as was the general consensus on chatter, and certainly it was my chatter post as well. I think anything he's doing now, in a way, is kind of like a bonus. And when he goes long, we're really going to see what he's truly capable of as far as like being a quality and top quality Indiana bred 3-year-old. Good effort by Rojo. Let's get on. Speaking of good efforts, we'll get on to Battle of Normandy, one of my favorite horses in the stable. In fact, I am the self-anointed and proclaimed president of the Battle of Normandy fan club, and we've got him nice and early, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Barring a an eventful trip like he had last time, and here's the race where going into the far turn, he just was not in a great spot. I mean, second half of the field, kind of buried in traffic, and I remember watching, going, "Geez, where is he going to go?" Lost the race, but clearly was best at any semblance of a cleaner trip. There's no doubt in my mind he smashes through that A other than condition at Keeneland. We have found this spot. Shug and I and the team had plenty of back and forth earlier in the week off that race at Keeneland, and looking ahead to Friday's opener with the bum post. Should we scratch? Should we wait and maybe take a shot in this condition next month, early next month at Belmont? But there tends to be scratches in these Preakness weekend races, whether they're stakes or undercard races. And as Tom Bellhouse correctly stated, there's no Chad Brown, there's no Clement, there's no Bill Mott. So Battle of Normandy is going to be a short price. And with all due respect, looking at this field, it really is sort of a Maryland-esque A other than allowance on the turf. Maybe the main danger is the dirt horse on the rail, the number 1 Captain, who, to my eye, really has way more of a dirt pedigree, has consistently faced the best company, certainly regarding races over the main track. And we know he's coming out of tougher than average back-to-back non-winners of one against Bright Future and our own horse, Giant Game. We'll see how he does on the turf. The motion horse, Graham's got a couple in here, including the 5 Evan Harlan, who just didn't get the mile and a half last time. He looks like a pace factor, but along those lines, and even looking at the Timeform US pace figures and their pace projector, which I highly recommend, that's anticipating and predicting a pretty fast pace here with as many as 4 horses in that first flight. And again, that probably, if you get an honest pace or even fast pace, that should just make the closing kick a Battle of Normandy that much tougher. We can move on to the Black Eyed Susan, and I don't really have a ton to say. I'd love to come on here and say, Faiza, I think she's like super vulnerable. And there's been some, I've seen on Twitter, some people that don't like her at all. But again, I looked at this race for quite a bit. And I mean, Faiza, in a normal year where Baffert's not suspended at Churchill, she's clearly a filly that would have been a heavy, heavy, heavy favorite in the Kentucky Oaks. And as a whole, this crop of 3-year-old fillies seems very, very average. I was in looking at Faiza going, what happens if she's in a dogfight? Because I get she was beating the same 4 or 5 horses, 6 horses out on the West Coast, including And Tell Me No Lies, who was way up the track in the Kentucky Oaks. But I will say with Faiza, she does seem like she's a bit of a jockey's dream where she can lay up close and sit off horses, as was the case last time in the Santa Anita Oaks. And she had to work for it in the Starlet and still dug in gamely, heavy favorite or not. So showed some fight in that race. It hasn't been a case where she's won all the races and has been untested and you go, well, shipping east, facing a completely new crew of horses, what's going to happen if push comes to shove and she's got 1 or 2 other fillies at crunch time looking her in the eye? I mean, she's already been in a couple of dogfights and she's won those races. And I mean, she's going to be an overwhelming favorite. If I had to give out one other horse in the Black Eyed Susan, and there's going to be some good prices in here because Faiza, I got to think she's 7-5 in the program. I don't think she'll be that high come race time. It would be the one Sacred Wish. I was wrong. I thought Affirmative Lady, who beat her last time in the Gulfstream Oaks, I thought Affirmative Lady would run a lot better in a pretty soft renewal of the Kentucky Oaks, and she didn't. But I'm not going to hold that against Sacred Wish. I happen to, and I certainly respect them. I'm not really a Sheets player, but I did have a copy and was looking. And here's Faiza's numbers, by the way, on Ragozin. All right. She's not that much ahead of the number Sacred Wish ran last time out in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. And I think for a filly, going a mile and a 16th over a very speed-friendly main track at Gulfstream Park. And I think that speed-friendly nature of Gulfstream gets amplified in those races going a mile and a 16th because there's a shorter stretch run. They use the first finish line because of the configuration of that track. I really think not only was Sacred Wish up against it with her running style, she ran really, really well in that spot. And I think her running style at Pimlico works even better. And she's got a little more real estate to play with, stretching out to 9 furlongs. She's an interesting horse for trainer George Weaver. I do think Sacred Wish is going to run a big race. Naturally, though, it's Faiza against everybody else. We've got one other horse running on Friday afternoon out on the West Coast. And again, with the week having started with Runaway Rojo and his good effort, I hope both the OG West Pointers, the boys, ran well on Thursday afternoon. Obviously, I'm taping this well before Chestertown and King's Ovation raced. I hope they both ran well, but we'll cap this little podcast here with just a quick look at Riverside's race, which will be 6:30 Eastern time out at Santa Anita. We freshened Riverside up. He's off a layoff of just under 100 days. And I mean, up through his race on Thanksgiving, I love just that like classic John Sadler progression out of him. Then he just didn't fire, and he was running, by the way, against like those were good fields of horses. I mean, you see, lost to Practical Move in one of those races. I mean, these and a bunch of expensive Baffert horses in pretty much all those races from Delmar on. And then he didn't really fire against Mr. Fisk and Harlow Cap. And then his last race, as much as I love Kazushi, he was pretty aggressive with this horse. So maybe a combination of just doing a little too much and being too hard ridden early, combined with the fact that Riverside was just starting to tail off, even though he's a maiden. Clearly looked like a horse that needed a little bit of a rest, and he's had that. He's also going to get a pace in this race to potentially close down. And looking at the field, it looks to my eyes, I haven't seen a morning line, that the 8 Ever a Rebel is the horse to beat and is going to go favored. He may win stretching out, and perhaps he gets loose in this race. I wasn't overly blown away by his most recent start where he was favored. I thought he had and if you watch the race, he did stumble. It was more of a mild sort of stumble coming out where he broke a little awkwardly and kind of bobbled, but did it going forward. It wasn't anything like Long Live the Queen last week at Belmont. It was a very mild stumble, but he sat and tracked off like a heated speed duel, like a dream trip, and just never really had any serious punch and was outfinished from a horse that closed from from far back or that was further behind him. So I thought that was a race he should have won, and I just always, although he's clearly never been worse than third in 4 starts. This was a horse that Wesley Ward originally had. He was short prices in his first 2 starts and didn't win either of those races. I just don't know, stretching out to a mile, how big of a margin of error he has in this race and if he even wants to go a mile. So I think all in all, a pretty good spot for Riverside to get back on track. This Doug O'Neill horse down on the rail has some early speed. Perhaps he's one of the ones that either vies or makes that first run at Ever a Rebel. And again, trying to size up, and I don't watch every race in Southern California. I would never, say to the contrary. I typically tune in when we have something in, or it's a big grade 1 race or something like that. So I don't admittedly know the horse population out there like the back of my hand. But this did not look like an overwhelmingly, like, brutally difficult spot. Excel Calculator's last race, I thought, was a big step in the right direction. His first 4 all kind of looked the same, and they were just average at best. But his last race was clearly a step forward. So he looked a little bit interesting. But I think this is a pretty good spot for Riverside, coming back off the layoff from post number 4 for John Sadler. So that'll do it for this little sort of Friday edition of WPT in 20. Naturally, I'll complete the week doing a little Preakness chatter. We'll hit Way Hill Road and whatever else I feel like chatting about in a separate podcast for Saturday. So at that, best of luck to Riverside. Best of luck to Battle of Normandy. I hope everybody has a great Friday at the races.